My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 41 years old. And this is the story of how my son-in-law laughed when I fell, and how the doctor's report turned my family against him. I've always been the kind of woman who puts family first. Growing up, my parents drilled into me the idea that family is everything, and when I became a mother, I carried that lesson with me. My daughter, Hannah, has always been my pride and joy. Raising her alone after her father walked out was the hardest thing I ever did, but also the most rewarding. Every sacrifice I made felt worth it whenever she smiled. By the time Hannah turned 23, she had grown into a bright, independent young woman. When she introduced me to her boyfriend, Ethan Brooks, I wanted to like him. Truly, I did. I told myself not to be that mother who clung too tightly or judged too quickly. At first, Ethan seemed charming, handsome, polite, attentive to Hannah. He shook my hand firmly the first time we met, and even brought flowers. But behind that polished exterior, something always felt off. I noticed it in small ways. The way his smile tightened when Hannah deferred to me on a decision. The way he rolled his eyes if I gave her advice. The subtle jokes he made. Just sharp enough to sting. Maybe I was being protective because I didn't want to let my little girl go. But as their relationship deepened, Ethan's mask slipped more often. At family gatherings, he'd make sly comments that cut me down while others laughed awkwardly. "Careful, Hannah," he once joked at Thanksgiving. "If you turn out like your mom, you'll end up eating television dinners alone." The room went silent, and Hannah snapped at him to stop. But he just smirked like he'd won something. I brushed it off, telling myself I could handle his jabs. I didn't want to ruin Hannah's happiness by voicing my concerns. When she called me months later, gushing that Ethan had proposed, I swallowed my unease and congratulated her with all the enthusiasm I could muster. The wedding was beautiful. Hannah glowed. Ethan played the role of doting husband. And I smiled through every photo, even though my heart felt heavy. Part of me hoped marriage would soften him, that responsibility would bring out the best in him. But things didn't improve. If anything, Ethan grew more comfortable being cruel. Subtle digs turned into sharper remarks. Sometimes he laughed at me openly in front of others, like I was the family clown. Hannah always tried to defend me, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She loved him. She wanted peace. And I didn't want to be the reason for their arguments, so I bit my tongue. It was during one of those family gatherings, a Sunday dinner at my sister Grace's house, that everything began to unravel. Grace had invited us all, including Ethan and Hannah, and as usual, Ethan strutted in with his smug grin, acting like the center of the universe. I tried to ignore him, focusing instead on helping Grace set the table and catching up with my brother Paul. Sophie, my teenage niece, was running around the yard, laughing. The air was warm, the smell of roast chicken filling the house. It should have been a perfect evening. But then it happened. I was carrying a tray of drinks from the kitchen when my foot caught on the edge of a rug. Before I knew it, I was falling, my arms flailing, the tray clattering to the floor as I landed hard on my side. Pain shot through my hip and wrist. Gasps filled the room. Grace rushed forward, Paul too. Hannah cried out, "Mom!" and started toward me. And Ethan? He laughed. Not a nervous chuckle. Not a slip of the tongue. A full, loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the dining room. "Well, that's one way to make an entrance," he snickered, wiping tears from his eyes. I froze, humiliation burning through me hotter than the pain. Grace's face twisted in fury. Paul glared. Even Hannah looked horrified. But Ethan just kept laughing, like my pain was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. My body throbbed, but the ache in my chest was worse. I had been mocked before, but never like this, never when I was so vulnerable, sprawled on the ground like a fool. Grace helped me up, whispering, "Don't listen to him, Laura," Paul muttered. Unbelievable. Hannah hissed at Ethan. What's wrong with you? But he only shrugged, smirking. Relax, he said casually. She's fine, it was just funny. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. My hip ached with every step, my wrist throbbed whenever I tried to use it, but I smiled tightly, insisting I was okay. Inside, though, I was humiliated. Ethan's laughter replayed in my head like a cruel soundtrack. That night, as I lay in bed, the pain wouldn't let me sleep, neither would the memory of his smirk. And though I didn't know it yet, that fall and Ethan's reaction was only the beginning of a storm that would change everything. Because soon, my pain would force me to the doctor, and the report he gave me would tear the mask off Ethan's smug face for good. If I thought the sting of hitting the floor was bad, Ethan's laughter cut even deeper. The moment replayed in my head over and over again. The sharp crack of the tray hitting the floor, the gasps from Grace and Paul, the burning ache in my hip, and then Ethan's laugh. Not nervous, not polite. A laugh that filled the room, harsh and cruel. Even as Grace helped me into a chair, Ethan kept grinning, his shoulders shaking like he'd just watched a slapstick comedy routine. "Mom, are you okay?" Hannah asked frantically, crouching in front of me. "I'll be fine," I murmured, forcing a weak smile. My pride ached more than my body. But Ethan, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, smirked. "Come on, Hannah, don't baby her." She just slipped. "It happens." Grace shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You don't laugh when someone gets hurt." He shrugged. "She's fine, no harm done." But I wasn't fine. My hip throbbed with every breath, and my wrist felt stiff when I tried to move it. I clenched my jaw, refusing to wince in front of him. Dinner carried on awkwardly after that. Paul muttered under his breath about immature men. Grace tried to keep the conversation light, and Hannah kept sneaking worried glances at me. Ethan, meanwhile, seemed completely unbothered, chatting away as though nothing had happened. I pushed food around my plate, trying to ignore the dull ache in my hip. Every laugh that echoed through the room made me flinch, because in my mind it was still Ethan's laugh, sharp and mocking. When we finally left, Hannah helped me into her car. "Mom, you should see a doctor. You were limping all night." "I'll be fine," I insisted. "Just a bruise." But she wasn't convinced, neither was I. Back home, I lowered myself carefully into bed, every movement sending pain shooting through my side. I bit my lip to keep from groaning, not wanting Sophie, my niece, who was staying the weekend, to hear. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the evening. My humiliation burned brighter than the pain. I had raised Hannah to be strong, respectful, compassionate. And yet, this was the man she had chosen to share her life with, a man who laughed when her own mother fell. The next morning, the pain was worse. I winced as I tried to get out of bed, clutching my side. My wrist had swollen overnight, the skin tender to the touch. I wrapped it in a dish towel with ice, pretending it didn't hurt as badly as it did. When I shuffled into the kitchen, Grace was already there, sipping coffee. She'd insisted on staying the night after seeing how badly I was moving. "You need to see someone," she said, firmly. "That's not just a bruise." I waved her off. "It'll heal." Grace narrowed her eyes. "Laura, you're stubborn, but don't be foolish. And don't let Ethan's behavior stop you from taking care of yourself." Her words stung. Was that what I was doing? Letting my pride keep me from seeking help because I didn't want to give Ethan the satisfaction of thinking I was weak? Later that day, Hannah called to check in. Ethan's voice could be heard faintly in the background, scoffing about overreacting. "Mom," Hannah whispered, "don't listen to him. If you're in pain, go see Dr. Patel. Please." I promised her I'd think about it, though deep down I knew she was right. That evening, as I tried to cook, my wrist gave out when I lifted a pan. The clang as it hit the counter startled me, and tears sprang to my eyes. I couldn't pretend anymore. The pain was real, and it was getting worse. And Ethan's laughter still rang in my ears. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table with Grace, I confessed quietly, "It's not just the fall. It's the way he laughed." Like I was a joke. Like I didn't matter. Grace's eyes softened. That's because to him, you don't. But to us, Laura, you matter more than anything. And if you want the truth to come out, let Dr. Patel put it in writing. Then, no one, not even Ethan, can deny what you went through. Her words settled in my chest like a weight and a lifeline all at once. And the next morning, with my hip aching and my wrist throbbing, I finally picked up the phone to schedule an appointment with Dr. Patel, never realizing his report would change everything. As the days passed, it became clear my fall wasn't something I could just brush off. The morning after I scheduled my appointment with Dr. Patel, I woke up stiff and sore. My hip ached with every step. A deep, throbbing pain that refused to fade. My wrist was still swollen, and gripping even a coffee mug made me wince. Grace had been right. This wasn't just a bruise or a minor bump. Something was wrong. But admitting that out loud felt like defeat. When Hannah stopped by that afternoon, I tried to act normal, shuffling around the kitchen with a dish towel still wrapped around my wrist. She wasn't fooled. "Mom, stop pretending," she said softly, taking the spoon from my hand. "You're hurting." I sighed, slumping into a chair. "I don't want to make a big deal out of it." She gave me a look so much like mine it made me smile despite the pain. "It is a big deal. And, Ethan." She trailed off, biting her lip. "What about Ethan?" I pressed. Her shoulders sagged. "He told me last night you were exaggerating. That you love playing the victim." The words cut deep, even though I'd suspected he would say something like that. "So me falling, me being in pain, that's a performance to him?" Hannah's eyes filled with guilt. I told him he was being cruel, but he just laughed. He said, "You've always been dramatic." I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat. For years I'd kept my head down and ignored Ethan's barbs. But now, with my body aching, his words felt like another blow. Grace, who was sitting with us, snapped, "He's gaslighting you, Hannah. He mocked your mother when she fell, and now he's trying to convince you she's faking it. That's abuse." Hannah looked torn, her hands twisting in her lap. I don't know what to think anymore." I reached across the table, ignoring the pain in my wrist, and squeezed her hand. "Sweetheart, you don't have to pick sides right now. Just know this, I would never fake pain, and one day, the truth will speak louder than his lies." Later that evening, I tried to rest, but every movement sent pain shooting through me. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Ethan's laugh again. It wasn't just that he didn't help me, it was that he enjoyed watching me struggle. That was the part that haunted me. The next morning, Ethan showed up with Hannah, acting as smug as ever. He leaned against the doorway, smirking. "Still milking that fall, Laura?" I ignored him, focusing on Hannah. "Your sister's going to drive me to Dr. Patel tomorrow. He'll run some tests." Ethan snorted. "What's Patel going to find? That you're clumsy? Maybe he'll write you a prescription for bubble wrap." Hannah turned on him, her face pale. "Ethan, enough." But he only shrugged, satisfied with the sting of his words. After they left, I sat on the porch with Grace. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves crunching underfoot as Sophie ran around the yard. I wrapped my sweater tighter and whispered, "I don't know how much longer I can take this. Every time he speaks, it's like he's chipping away at me." Grace's jaw tightened. "Then let Dr. Patel's report do the talking. Facts don't bend to arrogance. Once the family sees it, they'll have no choice but to face the truth." Her words comforted me, but part of me still worried. What if the report showed nothing serious? What if Ethan was right? And I really was just being dramatic? That night, as I lay in bed with the heating pad pressed to my hip, I whispered a prayer. "Please, God, let the truth be clear." The next morning, Hannah called again. Her voice was shaky. "Mom, I don't know what's happening anymore. Ethan told his friends you faked the whole thing. They were laughing about it last night." My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to cry, but I stayed calm for her sake. "Don't let his lies confuse you, Hannah. Tomorrow, Dr. Patel will have answers. And then you'll see who's been telling the truth." She was quiet for a long time before whispering, "I hope so, Mom." I really do. That night, I set out the clothes I'd wear to the doctor's office. It felt silly, but I wanted to look composed, strong, even though inside I was scared. Because tomorrow, I would finally face the truth about my injuries. And deep down, I knew the truth would also reveal who Ethan really was. Walking into Dr. Patel's office, I felt a mix of dread and relief, like I was finally admitting something I'd been trying to hide. Grace drove me to the appointment, fussing the whole way. "Don't downplay anything," she reminded me. "Tell him exactly where it hurts. Don't let Ethan's words echo in your head." I nodded, staring out the window. My hip ached with every bump in the road. My wrist throbbed against the brace Grace had bought me. I hated how weak I felt. But part of me was grateful. At least with Dr. Patel, I knew I'd be heard. When we arrived, the familiar smell of antiseptic and faint lavender filled the waiting room. Dr. Patel had been our family doctor for years. He'd seen Hannah through childhood fevers and sprained ankles. And he'd treated me for migraines when stress nearly broke me after the divorce. If anyone could give me clarity, it was him. He greeted me warmly. "Laura, good to see you, though not under these circumstances." His brow furrowed as he noticed my limp. "Let's get you checked out." In the exam room, I explained the fall. My voice shook as I admitted what hurt. Hip, wrist, back. I tried to stay factual, but when I reached the part about Ethan laughing, my composure cracked. Dr. Patel's eyes darkened. "He laughed? While you were on the floor in pain?" I nodded, blinking back tears. "He still insists I'm exaggerating. Hannah doesn't know what to believe." He shook his head, his voice firm. "Pain is never a joke, Laura, and from what I see already, this isn't something you could fake." He examined me, carefully pressing along my hip until I winced, rotating my wrist as I gritted my teeth. Then he ordered X-rays. Grace squeezed my hand as I sat nervously, waiting for results. When Dr. Patel returned, he laid the films on the light board. "You've got a hairline fracture in your wrist and severe bruising near your hip joint. This is not minor, Laura. Without treatment, it could worsen significantly." The words hit me like a wave. Relief flooded me. I wasn't crazy. My pain was real, undeniable. Dr. Patel sat across from me, his expression serious. "I'll prepare a full report. It will clearly state the extent of your injuries, the treatment you need, and the fact that they stem directly from your fall. If anyone questions you, this report will silence them." Tears welled in my eyes. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." Grace muttered under her breath. "Oh, I think he does." Before I left, Dr. Patel looked at me kindly. "Laura, you deserve compassion, not ridicule. Don't let anyone, family or otherwise, make you doubt what you know in your body. Stand firm." On the drive home, I clutched the envelope with the preliminary report like it was gold. For years, Ethan had twisted words, made me feel small, humiliated me in front of others. But this was fact, evidence, proof he couldn't laugh away. That evening, Hannah stopped by. She looked pale, worn, like she'd been crying. Ethan wasn't with her. "Mom," she whispered. "Is it true? Did Dr. Patel find something?" I handed her the envelope. She opened it with trembling hands, scanning the words. Her eyes filled with tears. "You have a fracture." I nodded. "And deep bruising." "Hannah, I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't playing the victim. I was hurt." And Ethan laughed. Her hands shook as she lowered the report. "He told me you were fine, that you were just trying to get attention. I wanted to believe him because he's my husband. But now," her voice cracked, "now I don't know who he is anymore." I reached for her hand gently. "Sweetheart, sometimes love blinds us to who people really are, but the truth always comes out." Hannah broke down then, sobbing into my shoulder. Grace rubbed her back, whispering, "It's not your fault, honey. None of this is your fault." That night, after Hannah left, I sat on the porch with the report in my lap. The evening air was cool, and the neighborhood was quiet. I thought about my parents, about how they'd raised me to value dignity, respect, kindness. Ethan had none of those. For the first time since the fall, I felt something other than humiliation or pain. I felt strength, because I had the truth, and soon everyone else would see it too. What I didn't know yet was how explosive that truth would become when I put the report in front of my entire family. Proof was in my hands, but Ethan wasn't about to let go of his arrogance without a fight. The day after my appointment with Dr. Patel, I felt strangely lighter despite the cast on my wrist and the ache in my hip. For once, I knew my pain wasn't just in my head. It was real, documented, undeniable. But I also knew Ethan, and I knew he wouldn't accept it easily. Sure enough, when Hannah brought him by that evening, his smirk returned the moment he saw the brace. "Wow," he drawled, leaning against the doorway. "Really going all out with the accessories, huh? What's next, crutches and a neck brace? You could milk this for months." Hannah's face flushed with embarrassment. "Ethan, stop." But he only shrugged, grinning at me. "What?" "I'm just saying Laura's tougher than she looks. She doesn't need all this drama." My patience snapped. I pulled the folded report from the side table and slapped it down on the counter. "Read it." Ethan blinked. "What's that?" "Dr. Patel's findings," I said evenly. "My wrist is fractured. My hip is severely bruised. That's not drama, Ethan. That's fact." For a moment, the smirk faltered. But then he chuckled and waved it off. "Doctors exaggerate all the time. Probably just trying to justify his bill." Hannah snatched the report before he could dismiss it further. She skimmed it again, her lips pressed tight. "It's real, Ethan." He showed me the x-rays. Ethan rolled his eyes. "And you actually believe this?" "Come on, Hannah. Your mom's been making mountains out of molehills since day one. This is just another excuse for her to play the victim." The words stabbed me like knives. But this time, I didn't shrink back. I stood tall. "I'm not playing the victim. You laughed when I was in pain. You belittled me in front of my family. And now that proof exists, you're scrambling to twist the truth." His jaw tightened. "Careful, Laura. You're making me out to be the villain here." Grace, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. "That's because you are the villain here, Ethan. No decent man laughs at a woman lying on the floor in pain. You showed us who you really are." Hannah flinched at her aunt's words but didn't argue. Her silence spoke louder than anything. The evening ended with slammed doors and tense goodbyes. Ethan stormed out, muttering that everyone was against him. Hannah followed, torn between loyalty and truth. When the house grew quiet again, Grace sat beside me. "He's unraveling, Laura. He can't spin his way out of this forever." I wanted to believe her, but I also knew family dynamics weren't that simple. Paul still hadn't fully weighed in. My parents' side of the family hadn't heard the details. Ethan still had charm, and charm could blind people. The next few days, the tension grew heavier. Hannah called often, her voice breaking as she confessed her confusion. "Mom, I don't know what to do. Ethan keeps saying you're manipulating me. But then I look at that report, and I know he's lying. I feel trapped." I hated hearing the pain in her voice, but I stayed calm. "Sweetheart, you don't have to decide anything today. Just remember, love isn't supposed to hurt, and truth doesn't fear evidence." She cried softly. I wish he had been kind when you fell. That's what sticks in my head. Not even the fracture, just the way he laughed." Her words echoed my own thoughts. Because the injury would heal. But that laugh, that cruel, mocking laugh, would never leave me. Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior only worsened. At Grace's next family dinner, he leaned back in his chair, smirking. "So," he said loudly, "how's the patient? Still limping around? Maybe we should all pitch in for bubble wrap." Paul frowned. "That's enough, Ethan." Ethan chuckled. "What? I'm just joking. Don't tell me we've all lost our sense of humor." Grace's voice was sharp. "Joking is when everyone laughs. What you're doing is cruelty." The table went silent. Hannah's face crumpled. I sat quietly, letting the words hang. I didn't need to fight anymore. The report was proof. The cracks in Ethan's mask were spreading, and everyone could see it. After dinner, Paul pulled me aside. Laura, I didn't want to get in the middle of this, but I've read Patel's report. Ethan's out of line. You don't deserve this. His words were the first real sign that the tide was turning. Ethan wasn't just my problem anymore, he was being called out by others. That night, I placed the report in my purse. Something told me I'd need it again soon, in front of the whole family. And I was right, because the next gathering would become the moment Ethan's cruelty was finally exposed for everyone to see. Holding that envelope in my hands, I knew it wasn't just paper, it was the truth. And the truth has a way of burning through lies. The following Monday, Dr. Patel called me back into his office. Laura, he said gently, I've completed your full report. I've included every detail, your fracture, your hip injury, and the medical implications if they'd been ignored. He slid the packet across his desk. This isn't just for your records. This is for anyone who dares to minimize what happened to you. I nodded, my throat tight. Thank you, Dr. Patel. You don't know how much this means. His eyes softened. I think I do. Too many people live in silence when someone belittles them. Don't stay silent. Let this speak for you. When Grace picked me up afterward, I held the envelope against my chest like it was armor. She glanced at it and smirked. Looks like you're ready for battle. Not battle, I whispered. Just truth. At home, I sat Sophie down, Grace's daughter, who had witnessed my fall. She was only 16, but she was sharper than most adults. Sweetheart, I said, do you remember what happened that night? Her eyes hardened. I remember Uncle Ethan laughing while you were still on the floor. I'll never forget it. I squeezed her hand. If anyone asks, don't be afraid to say that. She nodded firmly. Meanwhile, Hannah called every evening, torn apart by conflict. Mom, Ethan keeps saying you're trying to turn everyone against him. He says you've always had it out for him. I stayed calm. Hannah, all I've ever wanted is for you to be happy. But happiness doesn't come from someone who laughs at pain. Her silence on the other end told me she was starting to see it. By Thursday, Grace suggested we bring the family together. Everyone's been whispering about what happened anyway, she said. Better they hear the truth from you, with that report in your hands. The thought made me nervous. A family gathering with Ethan present sounded like a powder keg. But deep down, I knew Grace was right. The whispers had already started. If I didn't speak, Ethan's version would become the story. So we set the date, Saturday dinner at Paul's house. Everyone was invited, me, Grace, Hannah, Ethan, and extended relatives who'd heard rumors but didn't know the full story. The days leading up to it felt like waiting for a storm. I could barely sleep. My hip ached more in the evenings. My wrist throbbed every time I signed paperwork at work. But worse than the physical pain was the anxiety. What if Ethan twisted the truth again? What if Hannah defended him in front of everyone? What if the family chose his side? Grace noticed my pacing. Laura, she said firmly, you're not going in empty-handed this time. You've got Patel's report, Sophie's witness account, and the truth. That's more than Ethan will ever have. She was right. Saturday came faster than I expected. I dressed simply black slacks, a pale blouse, my wrist brace visible. I didn't want to hide my injury. Hannah picked me up, her face pale, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, smirking like he was heading to a party instead of a reckoning. Ready for the family circus? He quipped. I didn't answer. I just placed the envelope on my lap where he could see it. His smirk faltered for the first time. When we arrived at Paul's house, the atmosphere was tense. Relatives filled the living room, murmuring quietly. Grace hugged me tightly, whispering, "We've got your back." Paul cleared his throat once everyone was seated. "We're here because there's been a lot of tension lately. Laura, you wanted to speak first." My palms were clammy, but I stood anyway. I held up the envelope. 2 weeks ago, I fell at Grace's house. Some of you were there, some of you only heard about it. What you may not know is that I fractured my wrist and severely bruised my hip. I've been in pain every day since. I laid the report on the coffee table. This is Dr. Patel's documentation. It confirms everything. The room fell silent. And while I was lying on the floor, in pain, my son-in-law laughed. My voice cracked, but I pushed forward. Not a nervous laugh, not a mistake. He mocked me while I couldn't stand up. Gasps rippled through the room. Grace's face hardened. Paul's jaw clenched. Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. Oh, give me a break. It was a joke. Everyone's blowing this way out of proportion. Grace slammed her hand on the table. A joke? Ethan, you laughed at a woman with a broken bone. Paul's voice was sharp. Is that true, Ethan? All eyes turned to him. For the first time, his smirk looked strained. She's exaggerating. She slipped, I chuckled. Big deal. Sophie's voice rang out clear and strong. That's not what happened. He laughed, like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He didn't even try to help her up. The room erupted in murmurs again. Ethan's face reddened. Hannah buried her face in her hands. I sat down slowly, my body trembling, but my heart steady. The truth was out. And as Ethan scrambled to defend himself, I knew this dinner would be the moment the family finally saw him for who he really was. When I put the doctor's report on the table, I thought Ethan would deny, deflect, maybe even apologize. Instead, he showed everyone exactly who he was. The silence after Sophie's words was suffocating. My niece sat upright, her young face set with conviction. He laughed at her like it was a comedy show. I saw it. Everyone saw it. Ethan's jaw tightened. You're 16. What do you know? Kids exaggerate everything. Don't talk to her like that. Grace snapped immediately. She leaned forward, her voice like steel. Sophie saw what we all saw. You laughed at my sister while she was on the floor. Paul, usually calm and measured, spoke up next. His voice was low, dangerous. Ethan, I've been trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, but Laura has medical proof she was injured, and you're still mocking her. What kind of man does that? Ethan rolled his eyes and threw up his hands. This is ridiculous. So I laughed. Big deal. People fall all the time. It's not like she broke her neck. Gasps rippled through the room. Hannah flinched like she'd been struck. Ethan, she hissed. That's my mother you're talking about. He turned to her, his smirk sharp. Your mother's been undermining me since day one. She's always painting me as the bad guy. And now she's milking this for attention, turning everyone against me. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. I don't have to turn anyone against you, Ethan. You're doing that all on your own. Grace reached across the table, touching my hand gently. Laura, you don't need to defend yourself anymore. The truth is clear. Ethan leaned forward, his voice rising. The truth? The truth is that you all hate me because I don't worship at Laura's feet like the rest of you. I married Hannah, not her mother. Paul slammed his fist on the table. The glasses rattled. You married into this family. And when you did, you made a vow to treat us with respect. He looked around the room and saw no allies, only glares, folded arms, and shaking heads. Hannah's tears spilled over. She clutched the report in her hands, staring at the X-rays as if they were knives. You lied to me, she whispered. You told me she was faking it. You told me it was nothing. Ethan reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. Baby, listen. No, she snapped, her voice trembling. Don't call me that right now. You humiliated my mom. You laughed at her pain. And then you made me feel crazy for even questioning it. The room went silent except for her quiet sobs. I wanted to comfort her, but I knew she needed to face the truth on her own. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Hannah, you're overreacting. This is just Laura's way of trying to control you. She's been jealous of us since the wedding. Grace stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Jealous? Laura raised Hannah on her own after her father left. She sacrificed everything so that girl could have a good life. Don't you dare call her jealous of you. Even Pamela, one of our more skeptical relatives who had stayed quiet until now, spoke up from the corner. I thought maybe you were just immature, Ethan. But now I see it, you're mean. Just plain mean. The murmurs grew louder, circling the room like a storm. Ethan's face reddened. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked under the weight of the stares. You're all acting like I'm some kind of monster. It was just a laugh. Paul leaned forward, his voice sharp. Sometimes one laugh shows more about a man's character than 1,000 words. Ethan shoved his chair back, standing abruptly. This is insane. You're all brainwashed. He turned to Hannah. Are you really going to take their side over mine? Hannah looked at him, her hands trembling. No, Ethan. I'm not taking their side. I'm taking the side of truth. And the truth is, I don't even recognize the man I married anymore. Her words hit him like a slap. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He just stood there, glaring, his fists clenched at his sides. I took a deep breath, my body aching but my spirit stronger than it had been in years. Ethan, I may have been the one who fell, but tonight, you're the one who lost your balance. And the whole family saw it. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. And as Ethan stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, I knew the tide had finally turned, though the battle for Hannah's heart was only just beginning. The slam of the door echoed long after Ethan left. But his absence didn't bring peace, it brought the storm. For a few moments, after Ethan stormed out of Paul's house, the family sat in stunned silence. The only sound was Hannah's quiet sobbing as she clutched the doctor's report against her chest like a lifeline. Grace was the first to move, wrapping an arm around her niece. Sweetheart, none of this is your fault. He showed us who he really island. Hannah shook her head, tears spilling. I thought I knew him. I thought he was kind, funny, strong. But tonight, all I saw was cruelty. Paul leaned forward, his tone steady but firm. That cruelty was always there, Hannah. He just stopped hiding it. Pamela added softly. Sometimes it takes a crack in the mask before the whole truth shows. Hannah's hands trembled as she wiped her tears. I defended him so many times. I told Mom she was being too sensitive. I believed his lies. And now I feel like a fool. I reached across the table, ignoring the ache in my wrist, and touched her hand. You're not a fool, Hannah. You're human. Love makes us believe the best in people. That's not weakness, that's hope. But when the truth reveals itself, we have to face it. She looked at me, her eyes searching. And the truth is, he laughed while you were hurt, he lied to me, he tried to make me doubt you. Her voice cracked. I don't know how I can ever forgive him for that. Grace rubbed her shoulder. Maybe you don't have to. The rest of the evening passed in tense whispers. Family members came to me quietly, one by one, offering words of support. We believe you, Laura. He was out of line. You deserve better than that disrespect. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. The humiliation Ethan had piled on me was finally outweighed by validation. But the peace didn't last. The next day, Ethan showed up at my house unannounced. His knock rattled the door like thunder. When I opened it, his face was twisted with anger. Congratulations, he spat. You turned my wife against me. Are you happy now? I stood firm. I didn't turn her against you, Ethan. You did that yourself when you laughed at me on the floor. His voice rose. It was a joke. You've poisoned her mind, made me look like some kind of monster. You've been waiting for me to slip up since the day we met. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to wait, Ethan. You showed everyone exactly who you are. Hannah appeared from behind him, her face pale. Ethan, stop yelling! He spun toward her. Don't you see what she's doing? She's making me the villain so you'll run back to her side. She wants me out of the picture. Hannah's voice was shaky but steady. No, Ethan. You did that yourself. You laughed when my mom was hurt. And then you lied about it. You humiliated her, and you humiliated me. His face reddened. So what? You're going to divorce me over a laugh? The word divorce hung in the air like smoke. Hannah's lips trembled. I don't know yet. But I do know this: if you can't show respect to my mother, then you'll never have my respect either. Ethan's eyes darted between us, fury boiling under the surface. He finally muttered, "You'll regret this," before storming off down the driveway. Hannah collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Mom! I can't believe this is my life. I sat beside her, stroking her hair. It's not your fault, sweetheart. You didn't make him laugh. You didn't make him cruel. That's who he island. But now, you see it clearly. Over the next few days, the family rallied even more. Grace came by daily, bringing meals and encouragement. Paul called to check in, his voice steady with quiet support. Even Pamela, once skeptical, stopped by with tea and whispered, "You were right all along." But Hannah was the one who carried the heaviest burden. She stayed at my house most nights, unable to face Ethan. Each evening, we sat together on the porch, the autumn air cool around us. "Mom," she whispered one night, "I used to think Ethan's confidence was what drew me to him. But now I see it wasn't confidence, it was arrogance. And arrogance without kindness is just cruelty." I hugged her tightly, tears in my eyes. "You're stronger than you know, Hannah. Don't let his cruelty define you." Still, I knew the battle wasn't over. Ethan wasn't the kind of man to walk away quietly. His pride had been shattered in front of the family, and men like him always found a way to strike back. And I was right, because the very next week, Ethan's desperation would push him past arrogance into rage, and the whole family would finally see his true colors. I thought Ethan's arrogance had peaked the night he stormed out of Paul's house, but I was wrong. His mask wasn't just slipping anymore. It was shattering. The following week should have been quiet. Hannah stayed with me, avoiding Ethan's calls and texts, while I tried to focus on healing. My wrist throbbed in its brace, my hip still stiff, but I finally felt supported by my family. But Ethan wasn't done. It started with little things, angry voicemails, accusing me of brainwashing Hannah. Then came the text messages, "You'll pay for this. You ruined everything. You're jealous of me." I didn't respond. I refused to give him the satisfaction. But Hannah saw them, and each time, her face grew paler. "Mom," she whispered one night, clutching her phone. "I don't even recognize him anymore. He sounds dangerous." I wanted to disagree, to reassure her, but deep down, I knew she was right. The breaking point came the following Sunday. Grace had organized a small family lunch, just us, Paul, and a few cousins. We hoped it would give Hannah some comfort. But Ethan showed up uninvited. He barged through the door, his voice booming. "So this is where you've been hiding? With Mommy, of course." The room froze. Hannah's fork clattered against her plate. Grace stood quickly, her protective instinct flaring. "You weren't invited, Ethan. Leave." He ignored her, marching straight toward me. His face was red. His eyes wild. "You think you've won, don't you, Laura? Turning my wife against me. Making me the family outcast. You love this, don't you?" I kept my voice calm. "Ethan, this isn't about winning. It's about respect. You laughed at me when I was injured. That's not something a decent man does," he sneered. "Oh, here we go again, the famous fall. How long are you going to milk it? Maybe I should get you a walker for Christmas." Paul stood then, his face hard. "Enough, Ethan, you're making a fool of yourself." But Ethan only grew louder. "No, Paul, I'm telling the truth. She's been manipulating all of you, turning you against me, and you're all too blind to see it." The cousins shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. Grace stepped closer, her voice sharp as steel. "The only blind one here is you. We saw the report. We saw your behavior. You can't spin your way out of this." Hannah rose slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "Ethan, stop, please." He whirled toward her. "Don't tell me to stop. You're supposed to be on my side. I'm your husband, not them." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes. "You're supposed to protect me, protect my family, not humiliate us, not laugh at us when we're in pain." His expression faltered for a moment, but pride quickly overtook it. "So what, you're choosing them over me? Your mom over your husband?" Her voice broke, but her words were clear. "Yes, Ethan, because my mom has always protected me. You've only hurt me." The room went silent. Ethan's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. For a terrifying second, I thought he might lash out physically. But then, realizing he'd lost the room, he shoved his chair aside and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this," he growled, his voice low and venomous. "All of you." The slam of the door rattled the walls. Hannah collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Grace rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her. "It's over, sweetheart. You saw him clearly." "That's the real Ethan," Paul added quietly. "And now the whole family has seen it too." I sat down slowly, my hip aching. But my heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. The truth was undeniable now, not just in a report, not just in whispers, but in Ethan's own actions. He had revealed himself, and no one could unsee it. Hannah lifted her tear-streaked face to me. "Mom, I think I have to leave him." I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, my eyes filling with tears. "That's your decision, sweetheart, but whatever you choose, know this, you are not alone." The family murmured their agreement. For the first time, Hannah realized she had a wall of love and support around her, stronger than Ethan's cruelty could ever be. And as she leaned against me, trembling but resolute, I knew we had reached the turning point, the moment when Hannah would stop being torn in two and finally begin to choose herself. After Ethan's outburst at Paul's house, there was no going back, but Hannah still needed something to tip her from doubt into certainty. The morning after that disastrous lunch, Hannah barely spoke. She sat at my kitchen table, staring into her untouched coffee. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, and she twisted her wedding ring round and round like she was trying to decide whether it still belonged on her finger. Finally, she whispered, "Mom, can we go see Dr. Patel together? I want to hear it from him directly. About your injuries. About how serious they are." My heart ached for her. "Of course, sweetheart, whatever helps you see clearly." That afternoon, Grace drove us both to the clinic. Hannah sat in the back seat, silent, clutching the folder that contained Dr. Patel's original report. I could tell she was bracing herself not for what Dr. Patel might say, but for how it would dismantle the last excuses she'd been holding onto for Ethan. Dr. Patel welcomed us into his office warmly. He shook Hannah's hand with calm sincerity. "I'm glad you came. There are things you should hear for yourself." We sat down, and Hannah wasted no time. "Dr. Patel, I just need to know, is my mom really hurt? Not just sore, not just bruised, but truly injured?" His eyes softened. "Hannah, your mother has a hairline fracture in her wrist and significant trauma around her hip joint. These aren't minor. If she hadn't sought treatment, her mobility could have been compromised for months, possibly longer. Ignoring injuries like these isn't just careless, it's dangerous." Hannah's eyes brimmed with tears. She looked down at the report in her hands, then back at him. "And the pain she's in? It's real?" "Very real," Dr. Patel said firmly. "I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, and I can tell you without hesitation, your mother is not exaggerating. She's strong, but she's hurting." Hannah pressed her lips together, trembling. "Ethan told me she was being dramatic, that she was faking it to get attention." Dr. Patel leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp. "That says more about him than it does about your mother. Compassion is the natural response to pain. Dismissing or mocking it, that's cruelty." Hannah broke then, sobbing quietly. I reached for her hand, but Dr. Patel gave her a moment before continuing. "Hannah," he said gently, "you can't control how Ethan reacts, but you can control what you accept as truth. And the truth is, Your mother was injured, and she deserved care, not laughter. Hannah wiped her tears, her face pale but resolute. Thank you, Dr. Patel. I think I needed to hear that from someone outside the family. When we left his office, Hannah walked slower than usual, as though the weight of the truth pressed down on her shoulders. But there was a clarity in her eyes I hadn't seen before. In the car, she finally spoke. Mom, I can't believe I doubted you. Even for a second. I let Ethan convince me you were overreacting. I feel so ashamed. I squeezed her hand gently. Don't be ashamed, sweetheart. Love makes us blind sometimes. What matters is that you see now. She nodded, her jaw tightening. And I do. I see him now, and I see you. You've always been there for me, always. And he laughed. Her voice broke on the last word. Grace reached back from the driver's seat, patting her knee. That laugh told us everything, Hannah. Don't ignore what it meant. That evening, Hannah stayed at my house again. She sat on the porch with me as the sun set, her wedding ring glinting faintly in the fading light. She slid it off her finger slowly, turning it in her palm. Mom, she whispered. I don't think I can stay with him. Not after everything. Not after today. Tears filled my eyes. But I kept my voice steady. That's your choice, Hannah. But whatever you decide, I'll be right here. Always. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. You were right all along. I just wish I'd listened sooner. The cicadas hummed around us as the sky darkened. For the first time, I felt hope not just for myself, but for Hannah too. She was finally seeing Ethan for who he truly was. And as she slipped her wedding ring into her pocket, I knew her decision was no longer a question of if only of when. When people like Ethan feel the walls closing in, they don't soften, they strike harder. For a few blessed days after Hannah's visit to Dr. Patel, the house was quiet. She stayed with me, helping with chores, cooking meals, and sitting with me in the evenings. It almost felt like old times, before Ethan entered the picture and cast his shadow across our lives. But I knew silence from Ethan didn't mean peace. It meant he was plotting his next move. Sure enough, one rainy Thursday evening, his car screeched into my driveway. The slam of the car door made Hannah jump. She was folding laundry with me in the living room, and her face went pale when she heard his footsteps pounding up the porch. Don't open it, she whispered. But Ethan was already hammering his fists against the door. Hannah, open this door right now. Grace, who had been dropping off groceries, froze beside us. He's not going to stop until you face him, she said grimly. I took a deep breath and opened the door just a crack. Ethan, you need to leave. His face was twisted, rain dripping from his hair. Don't you tell me to leave, Laura. You've ruined everything. Hannah, get out here. Hannah stepped forward, trembling but steady. Ethan, you're scaring me. He softened his voice slightly, though the edge never left. Baby, come on. Don't let them get in your head. You know your mom has always wanted to control you. She's jealous of us. That's why she's doing this. Hannah shook her head, tears forming. No, Ethan. She didn't make you laugh when she was hurt. You did that all on your own. His mask slipped again, anger flashing in his eyes. It was a joke. You're seriously going to throw our marriage away because your mom tripped over a rug? Grace stepped between them, her voice firm. Enough. This isn't about the fall anymore, Ethan. This is about your lack of compassion, your cruelty, and the way you've treated Hannah. He glared at her. Stay out of this. This is between me and my wife. I straightened my shoulders, my voice shaking but strong. If you want to talk to her, you'll do it with respect. And if you can't, you'll leave my house. Hannah looked at him, then really looked. Shoulders slumped as though years of denial had just melted away. Ethan, I don't even know who you are anymore. He reached for her arm, desperation etched on his face. I'm your husband, that's who I am. And I'm not letting you throw that away because your mother can't mind her own business. She pulled back sharply. Don't touch me. His eyes widened, stunned that she'd rejected him. For a moment, I thought he might lash out again. But Hannah stood tall, her voice trembling yet resolute. Ethan, I want you to leave. Not just this house. My life. I can't do this anymore. He staggered back, blinking like he'd been punched. You don't mean that. I do, she whispered, her tears streaming. I deserve a husband who respects me, who respects my family, who doesn't laugh when someone is in pain. You're not that man, Ethan. You never were. The silence was deafening. Even the rain seemed to pause outside. Finally, Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Fine, go ahead. Be with Mommy, let her run your life. You'll regret this. He stormed out into the rain, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. His car roared down the street, disappearing into the night. Hannah collapsed against me, sobbing. Mom, it's over. I told him to leave. I held her tightly, stroking her hair. I know, sweetheart, and you're stronger than you realize. You just saved yourself. Grace sat beside us, tears in her own eyes. You did the right thing, Hannah. Don't ever doubt that. For the first time in weeks, I felt something lift from my chest. The constant weight of Ethan's presence, his cruel smirks and biting words, was gone. But I also knew the journey wasn't over. Hannah's heart was shattered, and she'd need time to heal. As we sat together in the quiet, I whispered to myself, sometimes the hardest fall isn't the one that breaks your bones, it's the one that breaks the illusions you've been clinging to. And now that Hannah had let go of hers, we could finally begin to rebuild together. The night Ethan stormed out of my house, something shifted not just in Hannah's life, but in mine too. For weeks, Ethan had hovered over us like a storm cloud, poisoning conversations, twisting truths, and making me feel small. When his car disappeared into the rain that night, the silence he left behind felt almost unreal. Hannah sat beside me on the couch, her body trembling from adrenaline and heartbreak. I can't believe I told him to leave, she whispered, almost like she was afraid to say it out loud. I kissed her forehead gently. That's because you finally saw the truth. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Grace handed her a cup of tea, her own eyes glassy. Sweetheart, I know this hurts, but you were brave. You stood up for yourself. That's not weakness, that's strength. Hannah nodded, though her tears kept falling. I thought love meant forgiving everything, even the ugly parts. But now I realize love without respect isn't love at all. Her words struck me. For so long, I'd felt like Ethan was chipping away at me, belittling me until I doubted myself. But here was Hannah, realizing that she deserved better, and in that moment, so did I. The next day, news spread quickly through the family. Paul called first. So, it's done? He asked. Yes, I said softly. She told him to leave. There was a pause, then his voice softened. Good. It's about time. He was poison. Pamela came by later with a casserole. I'm sorry I ever doubted you, Laura. I thought maybe you were being too sensitive at first. But Ethan showed us all who he really islanded. Her words warmed me more than I expected. For years, I'd been the target of jokes and whispers, brushed aside as the dramatic one. But now, finally, people saw me for who I really was, a woman who had endured, who had spoken truth, who had been right all along. Meanwhile, Hannah began to change, slowly but surely. She spent her days helping around the house, cooking meals, and sitting with me in the evenings. But more importantly, she began to laugh again. Not the forced laughter she'd used around Ethan, but genuine, light-hearted giggles that reminded me of her childhood. One afternoon, she sat on the porch steps with Sophie, braiding her cousin's hair. I used to think Ethan's confidence was what made me love him, she admitted. But now I see it wasn't confidence at all, it was arrogance. And arrogance without kindness is just cruelty. Sophie nodded, her teenage wisdom shining through. My mom always says people show you who they are when they think no one's watching. Uncle Ethan showed us, and it wasn't good. Hannah smiled faintly. You're smarter than I was. The family began gathering more often, this time without the tension Ethan always brought. Grace hosted dinners where laughter filled the air. Paul told old family stories, and even Pamela joined in with warmth instead of skepticism. At one of those dinners, Hannah pulled me aside. "Mom, I don't know how I let it get this far. I don't know why I defended him for so long." I took her hands gently. "Because you loved him, and because you wanted to believe the best. That's not weakness, Hannah. That's hope. But hope has to be paired with truth." She nodded, her eyes wet. "And the truth is, I deserve better. You taught me that without even saying it." That night, as we drove home, Hannah stared out the window at the stars. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't feel embarrassed anymore. Not about you, not about our family, not about where I came from. Ethan always made me feel like I had to choose between you and him. But now I realize I never should have had to choose at all." Her words brought tears to my eyes. For years, Ethan had tried to wedge himself between us, painting me as the problem, the obstacle. But in the end, his cruelty only made our bond stronger. The following week, Dr. Patel called to check in. When Hannah answered, he asked how she was holding up. "I'm healing," she said with a small smile. "Not just from him. From the lies I let myself believe." He told her something that stuck with both of us. "Healing isn't just about bones mending, Hannah. It's about learning not to carry the weight of other people's cruelty." That night, as I sat on the porch with Hannah beside me, I realized something profound. My fall, the moment that had humiliated me and sparked Ethan's laughter, wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of the truth. And though my wrist still ached and my hips still throbbed, my heart finally felt whole again, because my daughter and I were standing side by side, stronger than ever. For the first time in years, our home felt light again, like we could breathe without waiting for the next cruel word to fall. The weeks after Ethan's departure were a blur of small victories. The first morning Hannah woke up without checking her phone for his angry texts. She looked freer. The first family dinner she attended without bracing for one of his sarcastic digs, she actually laughed, really laughed. Each moment was proof that the storm had passed, and the sun was beginning to break through. But healing doesn't happen all at once. One night, Hannah sat across from me at the kitchen table, fiddling with her untouched tea. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think I wasted years of my life?" I reached across the table, resting my good hand over hers. "No, sweetheart, you learned. You grew. Sometimes the hardest lessons come from people who hurt us the most." Her eyes shimmered. "I keep replaying moments in my head, times I ignored the signs, times I defended him instead of you. It makes me sick." I squeezed her hand. "Don't carry that guilt. You saw what you needed to see when you were ready. And because of that, you'll never let someone treat you that way again." She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I won't. I swear, I won't." Meanwhile, the family surrounded us with support. Grace came by almost daily, filling the house with her steady presence. Paul took Hannah out for coffee one morning, returning later with a proud smile. "She's stronger than she knows," he told me quietly. Pamela even became a surprising ally, inviting Hannah for walks and encouraging her to focus on herself instead of her pain. And Sophie, sweet, sharp Sophie, reminded Hannah of the joy still waiting in the world. They baked cookies together, painted each other's nails, and blasted music in the living room until laughter echoed through the walls. One Saturday, as Hannah and Sophie danced around the kitchen, I sat back in my chair, smiling. My wrist was still tender, my hips stiff, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. "Mom," Hannah said breathlessly between laughs, "I don't feel embarrassed anymore. Not about you. Not about the fall. Not about anything. Ethan made me feel ashamed of things I should have been proud of. But now, I feel proud again." Tears filled my eyes. "I've always been proud of you, Hannah, even when you didn't see the truth yet." Especially then. The family decided to hold another gathering, this time without Ethan's shadow looming over us. Grace hosted, decorating her dining room with warm lights and autumn colors. When we arrived, the atmosphere was different, lighter, more genuine. Paul raised a glass halfway through dinner. "To Laura," he said, his voice steady. for standing strong when others tried to tear her down, and to Hannah, for finding the strength to walk away from cruelty. The family clinked their glasses together, their smiles genuine, my cheeks flushed with emotion. For so long I had been the butt of Ethan's jokes, the one people rolled their eyes at when I protested his cruelty. But now, I wasn't just heard, I was respected. After dinner, Hannah pulled me aside, her expression thoughtful. "Mom, I think I want to go back to school. Finish my degree, start fresh." My heart swelled with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You deserve a new beginning." Her smile was small but determined. "I don't want Ethan to be the story of my life. I want to write my own." In that moment, I saw the little girl I had raised, brave and hopeful, now grown into a woman who had survived heartbreak but refused to let it define her. Later that evening, as the family laughed and told stories, Grace leaned over and whispered, "You realize you've changed everything, don't you?" I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "You stood up. You didn't let Ethan's cruelty make you silent. And because of that, Hannah saw the truth. The whole family did. You reminded us what strength looks like." Her words made my throat tighten. I had never thought of myself as strong, only as someone surviving. But maybe, just maybe, survival is strength. When the night ended and Hannah and I walked home under the stars, she slipped her arm through mine. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for never giving up on me, even when I didn't want to see the truth." Tears blurred my vision. "Always, sweetheart. Always." And as we stepped into the quiet house, I realized something. My fall had broken more than bones, it had broken illusions, lies, and the chains that had held us captive. And now, we were free. The fall that once humiliated me ended up being the moment that lifted us all higher. It had been 3 months since Hannah told Ethan to leave. The seasons had shifted. Leaves now scattered the sidewalks in fiery shades of red and gold. And life in our family felt different, lighter, freer, stronger. My wrist was healing well, the cast removed but the brace still in place for support. My hip still ached on colder mornings, but I welcomed the ache. It reminded me of what I had endured and survived. Hannah had enrolled back in school, taking night classes to finish the degree she had once put on hold to marry Ethan. She came home tired but smiling, her notebooks filled with scribbles and dreams. She was building a future for herself, not the one Ethan had tried to control, but one she chose with her own hands. One evening, as she sat at the dining table reviewing notes, she looked up at me with a grin. "Mom, I feel alive again, like I'm finally steering my own life." Tears filled my eyes as I reached over to squeeze her hand. "That's because you are, and you always will be." The family, too, had changed. Grace remained my steady anchor, visiting often and reminding me that standing firm had made all the difference. Paul, who had once held his doubts quietly, now went out of his way to check in with me, his respect clear in every word. Even Pamela, who used to follow the crowd's whispers, told me one afternoon, "Laura, I underestimated you. You're stronger than I ever realized." It was strange, after so many years of being dismissed, to finally feel respected. But it wasn't just about respect. It was about reclaiming my dignity, the dignity Ethan had tried to strip from me with every smirk, every cruel remark, every mocking laugh. To celebrate Hannah's return to school and the new chapter we were both beginning, Grace suggested a family dinner at my house. I hesitated at first. Our home had been a place of tension during Ethan's visits, but Hannah insisted, "It'll be different this time, Mom. It'll be filled with love, not cruelty." So we cooked together, laughing as we moved around the kitchen like a practice team. Sophie strung fairy lights across the porch, humming as she worked. Grace and Paul brought pies, Pamela arrived with flowers, and soon the house buzzed with warmth. When everyone gathered around the table, Hannah raised her glass. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "I just want to say thank you, to all of you. For standing by me, for standing by Mom, and for helping me see the truth when I couldn't. I thought love meant holding on no matter what. But now I know real love, family love, means lifting each other up, not tearing each other down." Glasses clinked, Voices murmured in agreement. My heart swelled with pride. Later that night, as dishes clattered in the sink and laughter echoed from the living room, I stepped onto the porch with Grace. The autumn air was cool, and the stars glimmered overhead. "You did it," she said quietly, her eyes warm. "You faced humiliation, you faced cruelty, and you turned it into strength. You showed Hannah the truth, and you showed the family what resilience looks like." I shook my head, tears welling. I didn't do it alone. I had you. I had Paul. And most of all, I had Hannah, because no matter how far she drifted, she came back. Grace smiled. "Yes, but she came back because you never let go." Inside, Hannah's laughter rang out, light and unburdened. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me like music. In that moment, I realized something profound. My fall, the stumble that left me bruised and broken, had been more than an accident. It had been a revelation. Ethan's laugh had exposed the truth of who he was, and Dr. Patel's report had cemented it. The pain I endured had opened my daughter's eyes and given our family a chance to heal. I turned to Grace, my voice steady. For years, I thought my worth could be mocked away. But now I know better. My worth doesn't depend on anyone's laughter or approval. It's mine. And it's unshakable. She hugged me tightly. "That's the strongest thing I've ever heard you say." When the night ended and the family trickled out, Hannah lingered on the porch with me. She leaned against the railing, her eyes shining in the glow of the fairy lights. "Mom," she said softly, "you know what the hardest part was? Realizing that the man I thought would protect me was the one who laughed at the person who raised me. But you never laughed at me. You never let me fall alone. And because of you, I know I'll be okay." I pulled her into my arms, my tears spilling freely. "Always, sweetheart, you'll never face this world alone." The night was quiet as we stood there, mother and daughter, no shadows hanging over us anymore. Just the steady glow of love, resilience, and truth. My name is Laura Bennett, I'm 41 years old, and the day my son-in-law laughed at my fall became the day my family finally saw my worth.